Missing at the Table Part 2. In Part 1, we talked about who's missing from the table when a black patient walks into a cancer center. Today, we're going back a little further. We're talking about why there aren't more black physicians at the table in the first place and what it actually takes to change that. Dr. Terrell Coring, what's going on? Let's chop it up.
What's going on, Tony, man? My pleasure to be here always. Yeah. Thank you for having me again, man. I love it.
Good to have you.
Yes.
Part 2. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, man.
So in our prior conversation, we talked about a lot of things. This time I want to talk about the pipeline doesn't necessarily start at medical school. I think it starts earlier than that. We kind of teased and touched on that subject. What's that process? What does that look like?
Yeah. So thing is, like I like to tell everybody, being a physician, you actually joining an elite group. When I say elite, these people are basically rare air. The amount of applications you get per cycle is about 50,000 to actually take care of maybe 25,000 seats. So you got to understand, half of these people who are applying are not going to get in, and there's a 60% non-acceptance rate. So only 40% of these people are getting accepted into medical school. And you got to fit a certain bill. Most applicants who are applying, their average parental income is about $100,000. That's the household. And then also most applicants, their parents have an advanced degree, at least a college degree for sure. That's safe to say. And so, you're competing with kids who come from well-to-do households to have access to resources to help them achieve their goal. And then also you got to understand the demographics of physicians. Most physicians are Caucasian. Most of them, if you ever meet a doctor, they're, from an African-American standpoint, they're maybe considered lame or nerdy. And so they lack social skills to actually relate to the African-American. And then also they come off as super intelligent, super smart, using words that they don't understand. And so there becomes an identity issue. They don't feel like they fit this identity growing up initially. But as the African Americans start to understand themselves and understand their strengths and their weaknesses, they may have the aspiration at some point during their formal pre-med training to become a physician. But typically that starts, maybe pre-med, college, maybe not high school, probably definitely not middle school. And so when that person decides, man, I think I want to be a doctor, but now they already took some of their pre-med courses. Maybe they got a C on one of those courses. You see, the average GPA, the average science GPA, to actually be competitive for medical school is about a 3.8. Now, this 3.8 in classes like organic chemistry, biology, general chemistry, physics, you have to have a 3.8, meaning you can't get a C, definitely not a D or F. Probably got to get mostly A's with that GPA. So most, African-American pre-med students, they probably, when they think about being a doctor, they probably at a 3.5, 3.6, maybe a 3.4. So they already behind. And so they got some catching up to do. That could be intimidating. And
That's
so most applicants, they have to get another degree. They have to get a post-bac degree. So a MPH, a Master's of Public Health. Some of them, they try to do a bridge program to get them more competitive. So, once the African-American decide they want to be a doctor, they pretty much have a lot of catching up to do. And that affects the pool. And that affects the what you're seeing now, the demographics. That's why there's probably about 5% representation. It's because we got a lot of catching up to do. And some people, quite frankly, when they think about it, they be like, nah, it's just not worth it. The squeeze is not, the juice is not worth the squeeze at that point. And it take a lot of motivation, a lot of courage, a lot of mind retraining to actually overcome that initial inertia of, man, I got to improve my GPA just to be competitive, just to even be thought about, just to enter the draft, essentially.
Yeah, I want to rewind a little bit. I was on a pre-med track, and what I'm sitting here reflecting and thinking, I think most kids that have the idea coming out of high school that they want to be a physician or some kind of doctor, have no idea what that means when you step foot on the college campus. You get into this pre-med track, whether it's in biology, microbiology, biochemistry, physics, you're still in that same track because of that science base, but you don't really prepare for the what if this doesn't happen. I've had friends that were in pre-med track and 2.5, 2.8, 3.0. They didn't realize the ramifications that this track that they're essentially on is to launch them to try to get into medical school. Like you said, just to get into the draft. And you don't take that serious until you're a senior and you realize you got a 2.8 and you on a pre-med track. Then it's all of a sudden, what am I going to do? Right? So let's go back. I mean, you've done this, been there, done this. You're very studious, valedictorian, I think you said, and you went a different way at PharmD, but it's still the same amount of effort. And then you went on to make a bigger change, being the MD. So when you were in college, did you know, were you just so studious, you knew academically you had to put yourself in the game, number one, just with the GPA, regardless if you win or not? Or were you conscious of, I had at least got to have this just to give myself a chance?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tony. My motivation to go to college and to get a professional degree was to get out of poverty. That was my motivation. It wasn't because I wanted to do something great for society. I really wanted to get out of poverty. I wanted to earn a nice living for myself so I could take care of myself and my family. And that's exactly what happened. I knew I had the academic talent. That was proven throughout my life. People told me that I was smart. Testing basically corroborated that. So I knew I had that gift and I was applying it, but I was only applying it so I could play football initially in high school. That was a requirement in my household. You know, you make good grades, that basically allows you to play the sport that you love. That was the accountability piece. But then I stopped growing, yada, yada, yada. My dad said, you're not going to be a good athlete as far as to make it professionally. And I made the pivot to focus on academics. And so I was recruited into pharmacy just based on my GPA purely. I didn't even know what a pharmacist was. I didn't know what a pharmacist did. I wasn't familiar with the role or the profession at all. I did know that I worked with a pharmacist and I had this opportunity, not work with her, but I worked at Publix as a bagger. The pharmacist was there and I approached her. She was a black lady, graduated from FAM. I approached her, hey, you know, I have this opportunity to go to pharmacy school based on my grades alone. I didn't know anything about it. And then that's when she ushered me into the pharmacy as a pharmacist tech. I learned about the profession that way. And I realized this is easy. I could do this. I see myself doing it. And so once I saw myself doing this and I had the opportunity to do it, that's all I needed. And then I was just motivated to finish out the course, which was pharmacy school for me. But I entered pharmacy school at the age of 17. And so I was very young. I graduated high school at 17. And FAMU had a track where you could enter a pharmacy school, a 6-year program, and get a doctorate degree in 6 years. So I had a PharmD at 24, very young. And so I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew, okay, I got this training. I'm just going to go to work and make money to support myself. But once I did that for a couple of years, now I'm out of poverty. Now my mindset changed from survival mode to like, I want to have a purpose in society. I want meaning for society. I want society to be impacted by my efforts, my thoughts, my hands. What can I do? Because pharmacy wasn't providing that. Mm-hmm. And so my mindset shifted to purpose focus from survival focus. So now that I want to make a purpose, I have purpose. I want to make a meaning in society. That's when I started thinking and reevaluating my whole life, my strengths, my weaknesses. And that's when medicine really became a focal point for me. But it took getting out of poverty to really clear my mind to at least have these thoughts about making an impact on society.
Let me pause here because you said something that's got me thinking. So you were a bagger. You met the pharmacist at Publix where you were working. Mm-hmm. He gave you some guidance, maybe some encouragement to pursue this. Now we're talking about missing at the table. In last conversation, we were talking about this very thing about identifying. Here you are, an exceptional young man, a bright student, but it took the pharmacist at your job to validate and say, hey, you can do that. That's a problem, right? Here you are at FAMU, valedictorian. Nobody is identifying the talent and saying, hey, consider this. You going all the way through college. You got to go to Publix as the bagger, and the pharmacist there is the one that set you on the course.
Yeah.
I think about how even in my life, the counselors, they know you are exceptional in high school, but yet they don't put you on a path. You just figure it out. We got to do a better job of identifying the talent, encouraging the kids to go a certain way, providing the mentorship so they can get the tutelage along the way, and then they will have a fighter's chance. Point number 2, and you're going to catch this one. So you and I putting together the missing at the table. Initially, we wanted to, one of the conferences we were working on is to get the college students on the pre-med track to participate. And then what do we offer interns? Shadowing opportunities, mentorship. Look at the struggle it is to do that with kids that are in pre-med track. And even though you have someone reaching out to them saying, hey, you need this and we'll provide this for you if this is the track you're on, and they still don't do it.
Yeah.
What is wrong?
Parents, man, even my own parents, nobody sat me down. Like you said, my parents seen my academic achievements since day one. And they never said you should be a doctor. In fact, they never said you should be a pharmacist. They just wanted me to get a good job and have benefits and have health insurance. And so they led me to Publix. It was like, this is a good company. You should work for them. And I did. It took me about 2 years to get a job, but I finally got a job as a bagger. In fact, I was up for a promotion. They wanted to make me a customer service employee from bagger. At the same time, I was getting this opportunity to go to pharmacy school. And I asked the pharmacist, I was like, hey, Publix want to make me a cashier and move me up the ladder to the customer service manager route. But I'm getting this opportunity to go to pharmacy school. What you think I should do? And she looked at me crazy. She was like, you should come back here and work in the pharmacy. Why? Your career is not heading towards being a Publix manager or customer service or cashier. You're headed down another trajectory. You should come back here and learn this, not that. And so it takes that type of guidance. It takes somebody who has done something hard and arduous, who looks like you probably, to usher you into that field. My parents, they were non-college graduates. They probably understand how, arduous these educational programs can be, and they can't relate to it. So they can't speak on it really. And so if they encourage you, they don't really know how to. They don't know what to stand on. However, if you have somebody like myself who's well educated now, I could easily encourage my son, your son, or anybody else kid to do something academic because I could speak on it. I could talk about it. I could tell them exactly what to do. So people like to encourage you to do stuff that they can speak on, something that they have a lot of experience in, so you telling somebody to go to medical school who didn't even graduate college, it's probably not going to go well from either perspective.
That's right. So let's talk about the process. First step is you have to be positioned to be in the game. That's GPA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We talked about the after hour type, the shadowing, the mentor, all that other stuff you got to have.
Mm-hmm.
What does the application look like? So if you are in the game, now you got to do the application, walk our students through what that's going to look like.
Yeah, let me tell you, there's 4 key milestones to becoming a physician in the United States. First, you got to get through the pre-med coursework. That's the gatekeeper. That right there, that's the challenge. Only 16% of people actually are able to get through this process of getting what you need to get in order to get to the next step. When I say get what you need to get, you got to get a 3.8 at least, probably 3.6 or 3.8 in this pre-med coursework. And I'm talking about the sciences. So this is biology 1, biology 2, general chemistry 1, general chemistry 2, organic chemistry 1, organic chemistry 2, physics 1, physics 2, biochemistry. That's the core. These courses aren't easy. They're challenging. They're hard. And it's a reason for that. Organic chemistry specifically, most people need tutoring. They need about 50 hours of tutoring to really be competitive to get through this coursework. A tutor costs you about $25 to $50 an hour. And so multiply that by 50 hours, that right there becomes a barrier. And the GPA becomes a barrier if you're not meeting the mark. But if you're blessed enough to have the GPA after this pre-med coursework, now you're ready for the MCAT. You can't really sit for the MCAT unless you've done this pre-med coursework, because guess what? The MCAT questions are directly related to the organic chemistry, the physics, the biochemistry, the biology, the general chemistry. So they basically testing you on your pre-med coursework. It's basically a final exam if you want to look at it like that. But you need preparation. Most people spend about $3,000 to prepare to take this MCAT exam, and you got to
Wow.
score well. So the money it takes to prepare to do well with these milestones are others. So that's 2 milestones. Now the third milestone is the application itself. You have to be a great applicant, which starts with the GPA, the science GPA, and also the MCAT. That put you in the game. If your GPA is about a 3.7, 3.8, you good. You now you could probably sit down a little bit. If your MCAT is at least a 10, being competitive is 515. If you about 510, most African Americans 506, 507. Now you really are in good shape. But now you have to apply, and what also included in the application, along with the GPA and the MCAT, your volunteer hours. They want you to be volunteering out here in the community. They also want you to be a leader, not just volunteering, signing up saying, I passed out, bracelets and bags to people with cancer. Now they want you to lead an initiative, lead a heart walk, lead a cancer walk. They want you to help kids, get to where you are. Maybe you're a tutor. A lot of people volunteer that way. Maybe you lead a tutoring organization. Maybe you raise money for people who are misfortunate, who's suffering from a grave diagnosis. Maybe you help the elderly get to their appointments. You have to do something to show initiative. And with that initiative, they want you to lead. They also want you to volunteer. We talked about that, but you have to shadow as well. They want to understand that you know what you're getting yourself into clinically. So they want you to shadow. They want you to be culturally competent. So they want you to be able to hang out with different cultures. And they want you to be able to express that you understand different cultures. So a lot of people volunteer with different cultures, because guess what? Our country, your patients, your future patients are not just going to be Caucasian, Black and brown. They're going to be all cultures, all walks. And so they want you to be able to prove that you have that familiarity. You have to get strong letters of recommendation. That's a part of the application. That typically means that you shadow with some people, some doctors preferably, and earn a good letter of recommendation. And the last part of that is research. You have to be able to justify your research skills, at least know the process of coming up with a research or a research question and the process of the scientific method. Are you able to formulate a nice research question, a hypothesis, the methodology, and also generate some data and make a reasonable assessment? Those things have to be in place, and they don't start once you graduate high school. They don't start once you're in pre-med. They really start, at least the mindset starts probably, I would say, late elementary, early middle school, in order for you to be successful in these milestones. And then the last part of the milestone is acceptance. You have to get accepted after you apply. And that's the part that we're struggling with. Our acceptance rate is only about 38%. Compared to Caucasians, about 50%, and Asians, their acceptance rate is about almost what the Caucasian acceptance rate is, around 40%. So in totality, it's hard for us because we're not meeting these milestones as far as African Americans. And the main milestone we're suffering with is the pre-med coursework. We're getting weeded out and dropping out the pre-med process. Organic chemistry is annihilating us, essentially.
Yeah. You mentioned organic, man. I'm having nightmares now. I hate it. I had problems. You had to get your little molecules and put the molecule structure together. I didn't have really 3D depth in my vision, which I didn't know that at the time. So I couldn't really see it. And I was like, man, why am I struggling? It was because I had needed glasses. I couldn't really see the molecule coming out the other side and all these different things. But organic was brutal. Biochemistry was brutal too. I mean, so you're right. It's a weeding process where they want to make sure, that you can handle this prerequisite. So you got up to the point where you said, okay, so you've done all these things and now you're applying. When you're applying to medical school, is there different tier categories that you say, this is my forever school, this is my middle level choice, these are my rock bottom, or none of that matters? You just need to just apply to as many as you can.
Yeah, that's the best advice, especially if your application is not competitive. So if your GPA is below the average at 3.7, your MCAT score is below the average of about 510, and you haven't, gotten the letters, or strong letters of recommendation, your volunteering don't look good, and you're not being a leader in your community, no research or barely any research, you should probably apply to as many schools that your pockets can afford. This process can be expensive. We're talking about eight, nine, $10,000. To put if you're trying to apply broad,
Whoa.
there's about 150 medical schools in the country, and the application to apply is hundreds of dollars just to submit. And when you multiply that by 150 schools, and that's just MD schools, you got another 50 schools that are DO schools. And so if you have a weak application, it's wise to apply broadly. But what's going to keep you from doing that is money. You don't have enough money. Most minorities don't have enough money to submit all of those applications. And if you're naive like I was and you don't have good guidance, you're only going to apply to 4 schools like I did, because I didn't have proper guidance, and my application wasn't strong enough for me to only apply to 4 schools. I should apply broadly, but I didn't know. I had false confidence and poor guidance. And so the application looks like you have your prerequisites done. You got the MCAT done. You got your application. You got your letters. You submit, but you got to do it smartly. And you need money if you are a weak applicant. And if you're a strong applicant, you probably needed money to become a strong applicant. So what I'm saying is, no matter what, you're going to need the amount of money. And I will say, in order to be a strong applicant, you probably need about, I would say, 12 grand.
So you dropping nuggets right now. So you mentioned a couple things. I'm writing down. One, a friend of mine's son just graduated. Well, he had already graduated, but he went to one of the DO schools in Kansas. Forget which one. So you just introduced a new term. So a lot of kids may not know what that even is. So you said, okay, Tony, you can apply to these schools, but also there's about 50 DO schools. So what does that mean in layman terms? Because they probably saying, what is a DO school?
Yeah, you got osteopathic medicine. Basically, that's DO. It's more of a holistic approach. You still treat patients by administering medicine and prescribing medicine, but you're also telling them, you should focus on whole body. So exercise is going to be important. Acupuncture, incorporating Eastern medicine philosophies to the Western medicine approach. And so that's what the DOs subscribe to, and that's how they teach how you to practice medicine. You still have the same license to practice medicine, just like the MD. You still can do the same things the MD can do, but essentially you have a different approach. Your approach is more holistic, more mind, body, soul, versus just focusing on the body. You're trying to heal the entire being versus focusing on the specific disease, which, that's a good approach, I think. But it seems as though the person who gets the DO, they are pretty much less competitive for future opportunities. Historically, that's been the case. And so more people are attracted to the MD route, specifically because that makes you more competitive for fellowship opportunities.
So we have MD, we have DO. What about overseas? I had a friend that was unfortunate. He didn't get into medical school here, but he went to University of Mexico, which I later found out that is a top-notch medical program. But he went to Mexico City to medical school.
Yeah, I could speak to that very clearly and elaborately, simply because I'm a graduate of a non-traditional medical school. I went overseas. And the reason why is because I wasn't competitive to get into medical school stateside. Essentially, it took me 3 cycles, 3 no's to get 1 yes. And so I started my medical school journey essentially in 2013. I graduated pharmacy school in 2011. I practiced pharmacy for 5 years. Of those 5 years, I was trying to get into medical school. Tried 3 times to get in stateside. I was told that my MCAT score wasn't competitive, and it was not, simply because I couldn't put the time resource into studying for the MCAT. You see, in order to effectively study for the MCAT, you need I would say at least 6 months of unadulterated time, uninterrupted time, meaning your 40 hours a week should be going to MCAT studying. I was a pharmacy manager, so 60 of my hours of the week was going towards work. I also have a family, and so I was devoting time to my family, my stepsons at the time, and then the rest was going to MCAT prep. That led to a subpar MCAT score. And I knew I couldn't afford to just stop what I was doing to study for a test. I couldn't do that. I needed to support my family. So that being said, the Caribbean schools, they look at you, and they essentially, their model is to accept students who don't meet the mark but have high potential of becoming a physician. And when I mean don't meet the mark, it's typically your GPA or your MCAT score is precluding you. But everything else looks good. Everything else looks promising. And so if they deem that in you, they see that in you, they would accept you into their Caribbean school. But you got to understand, there's only about 5 strong Caribbean schools. Everybody else or every other school other than those 5 are probably going to be what we call a money grab. They're going to take your money. They're going to offer you false hope, and you're going to subscribe to that false hope, but you're never going to essentially avail any MD degree or any residency to practice medicine. That's historically been the case. So yes, you can get an MD degree outside of the United States, but that becomes very risky. I mean, I was naive to that entire process. I was riding on my own confidence and volition. And I'm glad I didn't look at those numbers of attrition. But the attrition rate is very, very high for schools outside of the United States. And the reason why is because they have subpar faculty. In order to teach medicine, you need an MD, preferably, or a PhD. So to essentially recruit an MD to teach medicine in a third world country or outside of the United States, it's going to be challenging. Your teachers are going to be subpar. The education is going to be subpar. And what happens is people may get the degree, but they don't do well on the standardized test to allow you to be eligible to practice medicine in the United States. And so that's what nicks you. That's what essentially preclude you from practicing medicine. You don't pass your step exams, so step 1 and step 2, which are standardized exams that you have to take in the US after you get your medical degree. And if you don't do well on those exams, you don't essentially get matched into a training program, because that's the whole goal. You get your MD and you want to get into a training program, a residency. That's essentially the chief goal. And so, yeah, you could get an MD degree in Mexico, but if you don't pass these standardized exams, then you're not going to be able to train to become a practicing physician.
What happens to a person, Dr. T, if that happens to them? If they don't pass step 1, step 2, what do they do?
So typically, what I've heard with colleagues that were right there with me at the university that I went to, they couldn't basically meet the mark to pass a step 1 or step 2. Essentially, you have to get a job. That's just point blank, period. Sometimes, but I don't know, after, the government passes this bill, a bill where essentially you can get extended money from the government past the $200,000 mark. I think it's some type of grant, and I got this grant too as well, where the government will give you beyond the $200,000 to continue your education. And typically most physicians need this money from the government to do so. But if you don't pass, and if you're not matriculating, you run out of money, because the government will stop giving you money. So that's one way that's going to annihilate you. You can't just keep repeating courses, and you may even pass, but you can't basically pass your exams to finish out the process. And that's what you're talking about. Those people, they are in a lot of debt, but they don't have nothing to show. And most times they can't just say, well, I got these prerequisites, let me just be a nurse or be a PA. But that's typically the recommendation. It's like, okay, you have these prerequisite courses you did well on. Maybe you could just become a PA. After 2020, this upcoming year, 2026, July, the government is saying we're not giving you more than $200,000 in education.
Yeah.
And so now it's going to be hard for these people nowadays. But historically, these people who don't do well, they'll essentially become a dentist, pharmacist, maybe a PA, maybe a nurse. They'll just keep asking the government for more money to continue something. But now it's going to be more challenging, I think.
Well, if we're in a shortage of physicians, it would behoove the nation, the government, to not cap the industry that you're having a shortage in. It's kind of absurd. That's absurd way of thinking.
Yeah, they're leaving it to like the banks, the private sector. So if you need more money for education, I'm sure it's going to create opportunities for some banks.
Yeah. Yeah. High interest rate lending.
The interest rate, though, you
all
got to
that
deal with
stuff.
that. Yeah.
Yep. And so when you get there, take us back. So you went through these steps. You have gotten into medical school, first year. What does that look like?
Yeah, so just to take a step back, I think my approach in hindsight, I think that's the right approach. I wouldn't change it simply because we know there's a problem with, I think, minorities even having the idea and the aspiration and the identity to become a doctor early on.
That's facts. Yep.
So most times people not going to realize this until probably in college, pre-med, that, man, I don't want to be a pharmacist. I think I really want to be a doctor. So I think what we should be encouraging people to do is just get a win, get a license to do something, get the prerequisites, become an EMT, become a nurse, some a pharmacist, become something. You just need that encouragement. You need to prove to yourself and maybe even prove to society that you could do hard stuff, that you can accomplish something challenging. Get a certification, become a firefighter. Some people do that. Minorities, they become a firefighter, an EMT. I became a pharmacist. That's rare. Some people become a nurse tech, something. They get a professional license to do something medical. That's the first step. That's what I did. So I became a pharmacist. I got a medical license to do that. The reason why I say that, because that gave me so much confidence. I feel like I could do anything academically. I'm like, okay, I became a pharmacist in 6 years. I got a doctorate degree. And so I used that confidence and I took it to medical school.
Gotcha.
And I think that helped me out tremendously. And so I'm in medical school now, first year. I'm still naive to the electrician. I met and he basically made me privy. He was included in my cohort. He made me privy to how hard it is to matriculate in the Caribbean as a Caribbean medical student. Essentially, they let 5,000 of us into medical school. So my cohort, it was 5,000 students. But at the end, as far as who practicing now medicine, only about 143 of us are actually practicing physicians. So it went from 5,000 individuals to 140.
Wow.
That's probably, I would say, less than 10% for sure. Probably maybe like 2 to 3% of us, essentially. And so that's a reality. You're only going to be in a 2 to 3% category if you go this route. So it's very rare to be successful going to medical school outside of the United States, especially if you do Caribbean. That's from personal experience, and that's what I've seen. So I didn't know, but I took my work ethic with me and my confidence, and I think that ushered me into a medical degree and ushered me into residency and training, and now a practicing physician in the United States. But it was challenging, and what I learned was that you gotta have extreme work ethic. You gotta be able to sit down and study 14 hours every day. Every day. And maybe after you take that test, because you get tested probably every 3 to 4 weeks, there's going to be one big test. And the thing is, if you do poorly on one of those tests, you pretty much have 4 big tests per semester. All it takes is one bad outing, and that destroys the entire semester. So it's high stakes, high risk. Every exam is high stakes. And so you have to be well prepared for these exams. In order to do that is you got to study your butt off. And so you need to develop these habits. And what helps you develop these habits for me was I already went through a professional program. I knew how to study. I really did. And I knew how to stay focused on my studies. And so I think for a minority youth, I think in order to develop those habits, either you start early in middle school, high elementary school, and these hard coursework activities, hard studying and prepare that way, or get you a professional degree, get you a professional license, practice in that, build some habits, and then go to medical school.
Yeah, I'm talking to Dr. Terrell Coring, Missing at the Table Part 2. You said some key things here. So you went to school outside of the United States. What was the makeup? Was it predominantly African American at your medical school, or was it a good mixture of people? What did that look like for you? Because I'm asking because here in the United States, we have several HBCUs that have medical schools.
Mhm.
And so typically you are in an environment where you will see people that look like you. Unlike the rest of the medical centers, you will not. So when you were in the Caribbean, you saw mostly people that looked like you, correct?
You would think, but mostly, I've seen Oriental people, people like Vietnamese, Asian, some Caucasians sprinkled in. Caucasians, they have the privilege to go to school stateside because the majority of applicants are Caucasian applicants and the majority of matriculants are Caucasian. And that's the same for Asians, both Indian Asian and Vietnamese Asian, Chinese Asian, Oriental Asian.
Mhm.
But believe it or not, the Caribbean medical schools graduate more African American physicians than the HBCU medical schools.
No
Simply
way.
because simply because they could let more people in.
Mm.
Most medical schools only have a finite amount of seats. Whereas the Caribbean schools, I just told you, they let 5,000 of us in.
5,000.
They don't have no cap. However, Howard, they cap, 100, maybe 50, so they have a cap on how many people they could sit down per year. And so the Caribbean schools, they win in that regard. They now are bragging about how they are contributing more so to the African American physician workforce than the HBCU medical schools because they could let a lot of us in. And quite frankly, it's a great option if and only if you have the work ethic and you have the self-learning ability to navigate those options. If you rely on a teacher, if you rely on somebody to hold your hand a little bit to get you through this process or any academic process, it's not going to work out well for you. So you have to be the right student for that environment. And you have to function well in solitude. You can't be a person who's highly dependent on your family for emotional support or anything like that. So it takes the right student to go that route. But if you are the right student, that is a good option, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you see a good mixture to answer your question. And I did see more African American. And so that made me feel comfortable. But it's also other cultures, other races as well, which makes an enriched environment. It also exposes you to other cultures. And that's helpful because most of your colleagues nowadays is going to be multicultural and definitely your patients for sure.
Yeah, when you talk to kids here about medical school, the thing that I hear the most from all of them is, I don't want to go to school that long. That takes too long. And I explained to a group of kids, I said, listen, when you first get out of college, no matter what your degree is, your first job is not your forever job. And you might give that company 3, 4, 5, 6 years and realize this is not the company for me. I said, but that's 6 years you gave to that one company. And I said, in your lifetime, you will switch jobs 5, 6 times, perhaps. Right. I said, so if you do that, the time that you're investing in a company that you have no intentions of staying with is your time that you would have went through medical school. All right.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the
Yeah.
differences in the years. So what's the expectations from year 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 in medical school? What should they expect, and what did you experience in those that transgression?
Yeah, so back to your point where the years, I think medical school should be a dream. I don't think it should be considered a job. It actually is, to me, I look at it as a dream because you have the opportunity to really drastically change somebody's life. It's a high impacting job, and high impacting careers should be looked at as an overarching goal and dream. And so just like, I love football, and for every team, their dream is to win a championship or a Super Bowl. And the way they approach that, they approach it as long term. It may take a franchise a decade to win one Super Bowl, but they will love it. Some franchises still haven't won a Super Bowl, and they've been in existence for multiple decades. So what I'm trying to say is, I think it's a great goal and a great dream for any minority to become a physician. But in the process, we should have small dreams and small goals. And so a small goal could be, well, maybe I want to be an EMT before I become a doctor, make some money, learn how to treat patients, learn how to assess patients, and then use that as leverage to get to my ultimate goal. You still can make money. You still can be impactful. But you know you have a bigger picture, a bigger goal. Now, and to answer your question now more direct, once you get to medical school, the first year is very, very intense. That's the weed out year. That's the attrition year. That's when you get hit, right in the mouth,
Hmm.
because you got all this information, this muscles, what happened. And so you got to be able to think very, like that, very critical. You have to have that level of reasoning, and you got to be able to understand a lot of material and apply your understanding of that material in a test format or in an applicable way in a short amount of time. They're not going to give you all day to learn this. They're only going to give you, they say, okay, here's 60 lectures. Each lecture has about 100 slides on it. So now you got all of these slides, and you're going to have a test on 60 lectures with 100 slides each in 3 weeks. Good luck. That's medical school in a nutshell, first year. And you're gonna keep getting lectured. They're gonna keep adding on lectures. And they're gonna say, okay, lectures are gonna stop maybe on a Thursday. Your test is gonna be on a Tuesday. So you don't have lecture on Friday, no lecture on Saturday, no lecture on Sunday, no lecture on Monday, because you're preparing for the test on Tuesday. Now this test is gonna be on 60 lectures, 100 slides each. And so you gotta produce and do well on that test on Tuesday. Your chances of passing the semester is drastically low. And that's the attrition. And so that's why they want, before you even sit down in a medical school seat, the pre-coursework, the pre-med coursework, the MCAT, your application lets the directors know, the program directors know, if you are going to do well with this level of coursework coming at you this fast, and you have to be able to produce and regurgitate and apply this information this quick, this fast, with a short turnaround time.
Yeah, I really think, we're talking about what layers and where does this start. I think you're spot on when you say middle school to high school. You have to have them focused on what's to come.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they have to be mentally preparing themselves for that end game when they get to the doorstep of medical school. This is what this going to look like.
Yeah.
And not just
Yeah.
all of a sudden, hey, I want to go to medical school. No, you're not going to make it.
It's a muscle. It's a
It
muscle.
is.
And the mind
Yeah.
is a muscle. And you have to train that muscle to be able to produce that level of production when it's time. Just like an athlete. You're not going to ask an athlete to go out there and run a marathon or a triathlon or, one of these crazy races, 26-mile race, right? Right out of bed. They have to train for that level of performance. The same thing with medical school. You're asking somebody to take all of this information and apply it in a very third order way. When I say third order, it's not asking, hey, Tony, look at this picture. What is it? It's not asking you that. Those are not the questions in medical school. The questions in medical school is, hey, Tony, look at this picture. If I apply this drug to this picture, what do you think is going to happen? So you got to know what the drug is they're applying. You got to know what the picture they're showing you, and you got to know the response that the body is going to have when you apply these things.
Yeah, I can see how stressful the career is. That is a lot of stress, and then to compile it when you graduate, you're sitting at $300,000 to $600,000 of debt or more.
Yeah.
I mean, it is almost like, how do you overcome that? I mean, you're almost at the point of no return. I can see how a lot of your colleagues will face burnout and just be overwhelmed even after medical school, because that's probably when it hits you even more, the debt.
Yeah, I mean, it can, but the thing is, if you're in a career and you're feeling impactful, then that protects you from the burnout. Now, you got to sign up for an environment that's also going to be mindful and protect you from the burnout as well. And that's where academic medicine come into play. And the disparity to academic medicine, like I'm at Duke, I'm faculty now, and I thank God for that. But it's rare. It's rare to have a minority in a faculty role in an academic center. And so typically these physicians, minority physicians, they go out in the community and they have a hard, arduous, high volume workload, which leads to burnout because their environment is not conducive. And so they put them in strenuous conditions, strenuous circumstances, and they put a cape on them and prop them up and say, go save this community. That's a lot.
So we let's talk about matching. Did you have to match? I mean, now this is Super Bowl. Every time you turn on Instagram or something,
Yeah.
kids talking about I matched. Okay, let's talk about what is matching. Do you have control over matching? And how did that affect you?
Matching is another money grab. So matching is a process where, just like medical school, you apply to all the programs for your for your specialty. So you out of medical school. I'm out of medical school. I got my MD degree, so that's great. And I passed my steps, my step 1 and step 2. I passed all my standardized exams to train in the United States. All I'm saying now is I'm eligible to train in a program to actually practice medicine. I have a degree, but I have to get a license. And that's what's important. The degree is not important. The license is important, but you need the degree to qualify for the license. So you need a medical license. In order to get a medical license, you have to have trained in a program. You have to match into these programs. That process looks like this. Programs get all of these applicants into their queue or pool, and you rank the programs, and they rank you. And if the ranking match, meaning I rank Duke 1, they rank me 1, that's a match. However, if I rank Hopkins 1 and they rank me 5, that's not a match. And so it has to be that way. You don't have no control over it. It's almost like dating. I guess that's the best analogy. Whereas you're on the dating app, the person like your profile, you like their profile, it's a match. The person like your profile, they don't like yours, it's not a match. And typically how the match system works is it's computerized. It goes into an algorithm, and they pretty much spit out, you match well and best with this program because y'all like each other the best, essentially. That's what's called a match. It's almost like you're on a dating app and you're letting a third party determine who you're going to date based on what you said you like and what they said they like. What you said you value, what they said they value. And then they tell you who you're going to be dating, essentially. And
So
so
if they
that's the
tell you
match.
that, is that who you set up interviews with? So if you match, do you set up a pre-date, like interview them?
Yeah.
How do
You
you
don't.
know? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's a good question. You apply. So how it works is, while you're in medical school, you have to determine what field you want to go in. The 3 basic questions: are you going to be a surgeon? Are you going to be a pediatrician? Or are you going to see adults? Or are you going to be psychiatry? So I think these are the 4 major questions. I decided I want to see adults. And so that led me to internal medicine.
Mhm.
Internal medicine is a subspecialty of medicine where you see adults. That could it essentially lead you to subspecialize. I knew I wanted to subspecialize, so you have to go to internal medicine. So now I'm applying to all the internal medicine programs in the United States. There are a lot of them. And in order to be competitive, you got to apply to a lot of them. So the matching process is another about $10,000, just to apply. It really
That
is.
would be free.
No, you have to apply to these programs. And so when you apply, I applied to as many as I could. And so I think I got maybe 20 likes. So 20 programs will say, hey, and I see where you're interested in our program. We're interested in you too. Let's bring you in for an interview. So now you got 20 interviews. And so in order to match into the program, they have to have interviewed you. And so now I got 20 programs to rank. You rank these programs from greatest to least. So I think my rank order was, I think I had NIH 1, Hopkins 2. I forget who was 3, but Duke was number 4. And I ended up matching at Duke. So I don't know how they ranked me or what order they had, but it was a blessing.
That was.
Nevertheless. And so you have to interview there, and you have to rank. And based on the ranking, that's your match. But it costs money, and you got to be competitive. And so in medical school, if you go to a Caribbean medical school, you're already not as competitive because you're competing for spots in the United States. And they're going to take their offers. They're looking at people who are already at Duke, who are already at these programs.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so you match, and once you match, that's what? What does that mean? You're in the program, you're an intern? What is that?
Yeah. So I misspoke. I matched to Duke in fellowship. I matched in George Washington in a residency. So you match into a residency like I did. I matched in internal medicine. I spent 3 years in George Washington in Washington, D.C. to become an internal medicine doctor. Typically, you have to do that in order to subspecialize into a specialty. So a lot of people want to be cardiologists. That's the most common, most competitive subspecialty of internal medicine there is.
Wow.
Gastroenterology is next. And I think now gastroenterology is neck and neck with cardiology. Medical oncology, what I'm doing, is also up there. And so I did internal medicine. Now, and while I'm doing internal medicine, I know that I want to specialize. So I have to make myself competitive for my subspecialty, which is hematology oncology. So now I'm meeting mentors. I'm soliciting myself to mentors in residency. I'm meeting the oncologist, say, hey, I'm interested in your field. Are you doing any research in this field? Can I be a part of this field in some type of impactful way to demonstrate my interest and to demonstrate my passion and desire to be a part of this field? They're going to say, sure, we have research projects that you can work on. So you have to build your resume and your research acumen. And that's typically the best way to do it. And also with me, I wanted to be involved in the community. So I was out in the community and residency talking to people about cancer. And I think that makes you more attractive too, as well. It just shows that you have initiative to make a difference in the field. So you have to politic, you have to campaign, and you have to be on your grind to be competitive for another match process, which is fellowship. But most people who are minorities, they don't have the wherewithal and the bandwidth to do another training program. A lot of people just stop after adult medicine, after internal medicine, and start working. They work as a hospitalist, they work as a generalist at that point. And I think that's where most minorities stop at. Only about 3% of oncologists are African American. Most physicians who are in the workforce are generalists. They're either internal medicine doctors, primary care physicians.
Wow. So you mentioned a couple things here, a lot to digest. So you mentioned residency and then you mentioned fellowship. Okay. So what are the differences? If you do residency, is fellowship a step up from that, or what does that mean for our listeners?
Yeah. So residency is entry-level training from medical school. In order to practice medicine in the country, you have to have training, meaning on the job training. Look at it as an internship. Look at it as on the job training without getting paid what you're worth. But it's the exchange and the transaction is they exchanging you education and experience for money. So they're going to pay you minimum money, but they're going to give you a lot of experience to help you out in the future. And so that's called residency. Typically, you do residency in pediatrics to become a pediatrician. If you want to be an adult doctor, you do residency in internal medicine. If you want to be a psychiatrist, you do a residency in psychiatry. If you want to be a surgeon, you do residency in surgery. That's the initial training ground. That's typically on average take about 3 to 4 years on average. So after medical school, it take about 3 to 4 years to become a unattended doctor, to being a doctor who don't need no supervision. But some doctors like myself, they want to further their training to see more specialized situations, such as cardiology, for example. So if you have heart issues, you need a cardiologist. You don't need a primary doctor or a general doctor. But that cardiologist did additional training called fellowship. After their residency, after their generalized basic foundational training, they did an additional 3 years to learn that specialty, specifically just focusing on diseases of the heart, using the cardiology example. The same thing with gastroenterology. They did another 3 years of training in addition to their foundational internal medicine training. Me, myself, I'm doing an additional 2 years of training to learn everything that I can about cancer. And so it's requiring more training. You're still not getting paid a lot of money, and you're requiring 80 hours of work per week from these individuals. So more training, more work, less money. A lot of people can't do it. They have to support their family at some point. Some people have family. Some people family gets sick. Some people parents get sick, and they just can't extend their training. I'm fortunate enough to have a wife who's pretty much was supporting me all the way through, even now while in training. And she's a pharmacist. So a lot of people don't have a blessing in a setup like that. And so, it becomes a financial constraint for minorities to further their training to become self-specialized. That's why, in my opinion, we have only 3% of medical oncologists in this country, because it becomes another financial burden to continue the training.
Dr. T, how many years is this for you in your training the whole time?
I try not to count. It's too depressing. But if you can include pharmacy school, that's 6 years. And then my medical school training, everybody do 4 years on average. You're supposed to a medical school. That's 10 years right now. And then I did residency training, which was 3 years, 13 years total. And now I'm in fellowship, which is 2 years. So 15 years of basically committing my life to understanding medicine. So it's a lot to sacrifice. It really is.
That's almost half your life.
You can't go in with the Super Bowl mindset of money. Your Super Bowl got to be impact. Your trophy got to be impact. It can't be money because that's going to discourage you. Your medallion should be, how are you going to impact your community? And purpose. It gives me I feel like I have great purpose now because of this process, because I was able to persevere the process, and it brings me closer to Christ, if I'm being quite honest, because that's what it took me to get through the process. And you
Yeah.
become more spiritually sensitive, more spiritually aware. And I think all of that is part of the package, in my opinion.
Your latter should be greater than your former. Got a lot of
Yeah.
good years, a lot of good work to do. Dr. T, if you could leave, we're getting down close to the end. If you could leave some
Yeah.
words and this has been
Yeah.
amazing. You have broken this thing down. I think every kid that's on a pre-med track or parents have a kid interested in medicine would love this because you broke it down from a personal standpoint of what this looks like.
Yeah.
If a Black high school student, Black, brown, indigenous person, and their parents are watching, listening right now, their kid is expressing interest in medicine, what would you tell them? What do you want them to hear?
Man, so I believe in a dogma. If you can see it and you believe it, then you can achieve it. But it starts in the mind. You got to be able to see that thing, man. You got to be able to see yourself with that white coat on or whatever, that stethoscope around your neck, talking to your patient. You got to see yourself, envision yourself as a doctor. Most doctors, the stereotype of most doctors is a Caucasian male who's well-to-do, socially awkward. But that don't have to be you, and so you have to overcome that barrier, that identity piece. You have to be able to identify with the profession, and parents have to be able to identify you in the profession as well. I told my parents I wanted to go to medical school. I heard crickets because they didn't identify me that way. They didn't see me that way. And so, some parents, they have to overcome their own fears and their own stereotypes. And they have to basically give you the encouragement to do that. And it's hard. It's hard. So I was trying to tell that kid to find encouragement, rewire your thought process, see yourself in your dream big, dream that you can become a doctor. That's critical. If you can't see it, and it's hard to see it if you're in poverty. And so that becomes a barrier. People who are in poverty, they're in survival mode. They can't see past tomorrow. They trying to understand how they're going to take care of themselves today. So those kids are an extreme disadvantage because they can't even dream. And that's sad to me. But if you're a kid who actually are in a position to be able to dream and you can see past tomorrow because you're well fed, you have the lights on, you're not worried about surviving, then you are in a great situation. Now all you got to do is convince your mind, convince yourself that you can actually become a doctor. That's hard. That's not easy, but it's possible because I did it. Definitely, if you can see yourself as a doctor, that means you already have the academic wherewithal. You already can tell yourself that you can make the grades. Easy. Now you have to believe it in your mind. Believing in your mind means you got to have a plan. Belief starts with a plan of action. And if you're a faithful person, it starts with faith. So when you can see it in yourself, now ask God for it. Believe it in your heart. Let God give you that clearance. Now you got the clearance from our Savior. Now you can start the process because the plans will start to fall in line. You got a plan. You need to meet somebody like me who's willing to mentor you to actually help you with that plan. But that's where I come in and a mentor come in. It comes in the planning phase. I can't give you the vision. I can't. You have to orchestrate that and manufacture that yourself. I can't even give you the clearance. God have to give you that. I can't give you the belief. God have to give you that. You got to give yourself that. But I can give you the blueprint. I can definitely give you that. And once you have that blueprint and that plan, you can achieve it. You can achieve it. But it's a lot of rewiring, a lot of reshaping the mind, a lot of building that courage, and building courage out of poverty, building light out of darkness. That's hard. Roses come out of concrete, but it's rare.
There's nothing much I can say to that or add to that. I mean, rewiring starts with us, right? We're so inundated with sports and entertainment, and we push our kids to these things knowing that the chances of them making it is small. But we invest, we buy the Jordans and the sneakers and all that. But if we can reprogram the way we think and put them on a science team or encourage them to travel abroad, redistributing the money that we do have. I mean, you just spoke a mouthful.
Yeah.
And I love how you phrased that. I can't add to that. Missing at the Table Part 2 with Dr. Terrell Coring. I mean, if you guys didn't get anything out of this, I don't know. But we're going to keep coming at you with it.
Yeah, man, let's
Stick
do
with
it. Let's encourage our youth. That's a big thing. So adults listening to this, stop telling our youth, oh, you're going to be the next LeBron or Michael Jordan. That's cool. That's the side hustle. That's to keep you engaged in school and to be the cool person. So sports are important, and it also helps us stay in shape and a stress reliever too. But that shouldn't be the entree. That shouldn't be the main focus. The main focus, especially if your kid is academically inclined, you seeing your kids get straight A's. Why are you telling your kid to go be anything less than, the highest, emeritus thing that they can become? Always shoot for the moon. If you fall and hit a star, that's okay. But we need to be shooting for the moon, out of a galaxy. And just because you didn't do it and you didn't have the grades or the smarts, God do not discriminate his gifts. God gave your kid, he could have gave him that gift of academic intelligence, and you could be you could be ignoring it because you didn't get it. And so if you identify that in your kid, usher them, just like you will usher them to a coach. If they were athletically inclined, you should usher them to somebody who's academically inclined to cultivate your kid's talent. That's my last thing.
Missing at the Table Part 2 with Dr. Terrell Coring. Dr. T, we thank you for your work. Thank you for everything that you're doing out here in the community. And I look forward to Part 3.
Yes, sir. Let's keep it going, T.
All right. You have a good day, rest of your day, and I will see you on tomorrow.
All right. Peace, Tony.
God bless. Yeah. See you. Listeners, if this episode moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Follow the Orlandis Foundation, www.theorlandisfoundation.org, for more on health equity, mentorship, and real talk. Find Eagles Don't Quack on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or WARR Radio 103.5 FM, 1520 AM on your radio dial, or WARRADIO.com. That's WARRradio.com. Eagles Don't Quack, we rise. See you next time.